The answer is going to piss some people off.
All of a sudden you're facing someone, you're like, who the hell are you? I am a divorce lawyer out of Massachusetts, and Dave here is a dating relationship coach. Hitch is one of my all-time favorite movies. I think I've watched it 100 times. I got the dancing scene down. Is that like you in real life? Like what exactly do you do and how did you get into it?
That's really funny comparison. I do enjoy the movie as well. Kevin James and Will Smith, they just nail it. But I think the major difference between Hitch and myself is that he does bring in a little bit of that controlled environment. He manipulates or tries to control the environment as much as he possibly can. And that to me just doesn't feel as authentic as I would like to approach life or dating in general. So what I do specifically is I help my clients connect to the truth that's inside of them, like their intuition. When they're out there navigating modern dating with text messages and social media, and dating apps is a way that people connect and communicate, I want them to understand what shows up in their body so that they can understand, is this the right fit for me? When exploring dating, that's the question I want them to answer is, do I want to see this person again? And are they the right fit for my life?
What got you into it and that drive behind this is really what I want to do with my career?
I definitely struggled on the dating apps myself, not so much in writing my profile. Okay, that had something to do with it, but it had more to do with a couple of breakups that I went through. And I finally realized that I was the factor. I was the common denominator in both of those relationships ending. And I wanted to go through a period of self-discovery of like, what was I responsible for? How much can I take responsibility and ownership for? And so I started this little podcast out of Denver called the Be Leave, Be Real, Be Bold podcast for authentic dating. And I began interviewing experts in the field like counselors and therapists and dating coaches and authors to uncover what was showing up in modern dating for people out there. You know, what I learned along the way is that fear is the major component holding people back in their relationships. So I dug into that. I dove into what I was afraid of, what other people are afraid of, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And now that podcast is listened to in 83 countries and about 70,000 downloads now. So here
That's
we are on
awesome.
TikTok 5 years later.
I've heard a number of times and I've seen it through divorce. A lot of times social media is not really relationship friendly to many people. What is your view where you deal with the start of a relationship and I'm dealing with the end of a relationship? You know, what do you see as the interplay of social media in making relationships work, and what kind of advice do you give people as they're headed in that direction, you know, what to look out for?
Sure. I think that social media is a powerful tool when it's used in the right way. Honestly, social media is just a mirror for us to view ourselves through. When it comes to relationships, if there is a challenge in communication or conflict over social media, it often comes down to just trust. If there is a difficulty trusting each other, social media will reflect that distrust. And the conflict will show up over things that are generally unrelated to the trust. I think it goes back to that fear factor of how do we address the fact that I don't trust you with social media? And if we're able to communicate clearly and effectively and compassionately about our distrust of our partner and their use of social media, well, then our relationships can flourish. But if we can't communicate clearly about what we're feeling, then it's going to deteriorate and I'll send them to you.
Perfect, but only if they live in Massachusetts or Rhode Island.
That's right.
Otherwise, they can just
That's
watch
right.
my TikTok.
Right.
Now, I've seen, and I have some friends that do it. So if any of my friends are watching, I'm not speaking to you specifically, but I've seen people do like the double join in like Facebook. So it will be like Jessica and Chris in one profile. Is that a trust issue? Is that a transparency issue? Or, you know, does that send up a red flag?
Honestly, I think that people can co-create whatever they want to in a relationship and whatever fits them best. From the outside looking in, I see a lot of codependency there. I see the opposite of what I'm looking for in a relationship, which is interdependence. Two individuals who live their own lives come together and they support each other on this journey to be the best versions of themselves. And I don't know if combining a social media platform, unless you're doing it for business purposes, is a very good strategy for maintaining an interdependent relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee you it's always one person's idea of like, hey, I've got this idea. I'm going to tiptoe around the real issue of I don't trust your use around social media. And let's just combine our platforms and have one that says Jenny and Joe, and I got Dad Bod here saying co-accounts are just goofy. I mean, goofy might be the right word for it. Thanks, brother. I appreciate you contributing.
Yeah, and I guess if you are watching this and you either find us humorous or entertaining or anything, please shoot out those hearts, because I know that helps, something with the algorithm, sending us out, letting other people know we're here. And we're really hoping to get some good information so that you guys don't fall into the downfalls, again, of having to hire someone like me. If you're just joining us, I am a divorce and family law, but a lawyer out of Massachusetts. And Dave here is a dating relationship coach. Oh, here's a question, I guess, from the chat. What kind of education do you need to become a dating coach? So what is it? We talked a little bit about, why you got into it. What did you learn? What did you do to get to the point where you're helping other people?
I feel as if anybody who's further along in their journey of personal growth and development can help another person. Does it necessarily mean that they're qualified to do so? No. What I've found is I have a master's degree in myself, basically. Like, I went into this long journey of self-discovery and understanding what my bullshit was and my patterns so that I can recognize it in the people that I work with. My job is really just to support somebody as they go on that same length of journey.
Yeah, I love that. I wrote it down, master's degree in myself, because I really think that's what a lot of people are missing. And I think especially, maybe we can turn to talking about red flags and kind of what to look for. But I think a lot of times when you are not self-assured enough, when you don't really know exactly what you're looking for or why it's important to you, it's easy to miss sometimes the red flags that pop up. So in relationships, when you're working with somebody, and I have so many questions, so I'm going to try to only do them one at a time. But when you're working with somebody and talking about what to look for in a date, because there are crazy females out there are crazy guys out there, this isn't a gender issue, this is a personality issue. So when you're working with whoever your client is and talking about what to look for so they don't fall into the trap of just hearing exactly what they want to hear, because when you're dating and you get in front of somebody and they're like, I've never felt like this before. This is the first time I've ever laid sight on someone and fell in love with them. And then you feel so important, and I think that kind of goes back to, again, that mastering yourself, you are. But how do you work with people? What do you tell them? And I know we don't have all the time in the world, but
Sure.
So we could do it short.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are some things that I'm listening for when people talk about the relationships that they're in or that they want to be in. And what I'm listening for is, what kind of excuses or justifications do you have for your own behavior and their behavior? It's almost as if like that's how we get stuck in this trap of chasing after somebody who's not the right fit for us. And recently I was having a consultation with somebody and she kept saying that it felt like things were equal, but she was always driving almost an hour to see him every single time. And for me, that shows up as like, are you putting your needs first in the relationship? And ultimately, the answer is likely to be no. But how do we become self-aware enough to say that enough is enough? I'm no longer going to drive an hour to see you. I would like you to come see me because I have my own place, my kids aren't here, etc.
Mm-hmm. When you start with a new client or let's just take the overall, what do you see as the most typical reason someone would hire you? Like, what is it that they're looking for that they need help with in regards to dating?
There's always that question of, why do they do this behavior? Why am I feeling like this when I'm in a relationship with somebody new? And the question is less about why. Like, finding a great counselor or therapist is going to be a great way to uncover why we do things. What my goal is to help people understand the what and the how. What is it making you feel? And how do you want to respond to that? And oftentimes my clients, the people who come to me, are so detached from what they're feeling in their body because they're overthinking it in their head. And when we can get past that overthinking tendency and get in touch with our body, all of the answers are going to lie right here in our gut.
Okay. And then I think, it kind of flows from that when, especially if you're coming out of a divorce, or a long term committed relationship. And for some people, it doesn't even have to be long term, you fall hard, you get out, and it's heartbreaking. What do you think are the things people should work on before they start dating again when they're coming out of a relationship? Whether it's marriage, whether it's long term, whether it's something that hit them hard, what do you think is the most important thing before you start dating?
Oh, that is the question, isn't it? And I love to guide my clients through five things, actually. It's not just one thing that's going to magically repair all of that hurt and that anguish, disconnection from self that happened during your last relationship. What I like to focus on are five pillars of optimal health: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and financial. These are five things, areas of our lives that we can focus on to help rebuild trust in ourselves so that we can understand that we're going to make better decisions in the future that support our goals. So if we're getting exercise regularly, that supports our physical pillar of health. When we're chatting with somebody who's objective and neutral, who cares about us but isn't invested in the outcome of our choices, that helps us with our mental and our emotional pillars of health. Spiritually, I think that we definitely need to connect with something higher than ourselves. And I choose to do that through journaling, meditation, breath work, and jujitsu, and my relationship with God. So spirituality is a big component of healing after a relationship. And then financially, that's our final pillar of health that oftentimes my clients and people that I work with are avoiding. And what is it about the financial pillar of health that we're avoiding? All of our BS that we see in our relationships also show up in our relationship with money. If we're avoiding our focus on our financial health, we're also going to be avoiding something in our relationship health as well. And so I like to set aside some time after a relationship ends to just pour yourself into rebuilding whatever was fractured there. Did you live with your partner? Did you have to hire a divorce lawyer, which can get pricey? What is it going to take for us to rebuild that foundation of self-trust through the financial pillar of health? So those are my five areas that I like to focus on with our clients.
So finances, obviously on a first date, you can't say, you know where I'm going.
Maybe.
So you're on one of your first dates, and what I see a lot of times, and I always get killed on it for it whenever I post any video about money or child support or alimony, because I'm told, child supporters for people who can't take care of themselves, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times my response, at least how I feel in my gut, is if you want to make sure you're not paying child support, even if you're in equal parenting, you have to be aware of what the other person is earning, because you kind of need to make economic levels. Because one person's making a lot more, regardless of whether that's the man or the woman, they're going to end up paying unless they have the custodial rights to the child. At what point in a relationship is it acceptable to bring that up? And, some of it you can look at how they're dressed in their cars and stuff like that, but you never know if somebody is just showing, they have nothing in their wallet because they spend it all. So at what point do you think it's appropriate to start talking about where money is? Is it until after you get really involved, or do you do that ahead of time and then maybe look a little shallow? What is your suggestion there?
Yeah, I hear you where you're coming from with this question. Sometimes people are raised in homes that are like, you don't talk about money, you tiptoe around the topic, you end up getting into these relationships where you're either withholding information or you feel as if information is being withheld from you. My most recent first date, I did bring up money. We connected deeply over the topic of jujitsu. We both have experience there. And I brought up my jujitsu membership as a financial pillar of health. It plays into how I view my own optimal health. My jujitsu membership is about $180 some a month. And there's a lot of reasons why it's that high. One, it keeps people who aren't interested in the sport from just joining up to test it out. And then it also brings in a level of commitment too. It's called it's investing in my health. And so I was able to bring up the topic of money on the first date through the values that I have in my life. I value jujitsu so much that I'm going to do whatever it takes to afford that bill. And it was a representation of where I'm at in my financial healing journey, right? If I have a money wound from my past and I don't want to talk about money, well, then every time it comes up in the early stages of relationship, I'll avoid it. And these are ways that we can definitely check in with our partner. Okay, I'm going to bring up the topic of money. My car got recently stolen, so I had to get a car payment for the first time in 3 years. These are lighthearted ways for me to bring up a financial conversation. And I can check in with the other person. Are they open to discussing it? Are they avoiding it for some reason? And when it comes to asking about salary, I think that's officially what your question is. How do we ask the other person what they make? I would say that the most important thing to ask and to cover early on in dating is, are they financially secure enough to handle their own lifestyle? Are they living outside of their means? Are they buying cars that they can't afford? Are they running up credit card debt by peacocking? I think is what you were talking about, like the way they dress. Honestly, how do they handle themselves around money is really the most important thing. How do they talk about it? How do they not talk about it? And then how do they show their financial security? Do they have 3 roommates in a $1 million house? That wouldn't make sense to me. And it offers up an opportunity to become more curious about where they stand with money and how they manage it.
Well, I've got 6 roommates living in my house. They're all my children, but they don't. We thought so I'm in a second marriage. My husband has 3 younger kids. Mine are all adults. They moved out, but now they came back. So
let's talk about boundaries.
Yeah. What's your recommendation on what do you think is the best type of date to set yourself up well, and who should pay for that? Should it be assumed that you guys are both going in equally? Should one person pay? Should you fight over it?
Now, was your question about the first date? Are you talking about like an ideal first date and then who should pay?
Yeah.
I like this question because it ruffles so many feathers. I'm a big fan of a coffee date for the first date. I like to keep things like more casual, low investment so that we can really truly see that person as who they are. The one thing that you're looking for from a first date is, do I want to see this person again? Mm-hmm. Not how much they spent, not what restaurant they took me to, not did they wine and dine me. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for this person to try and impress me, nor am I looking to try and impress the other person. I really just want to feel their energy in this space and on that first date. Now, the person who asks that other person out on the first date, that's who pays.
So whoever asks, got it.
Yes. Generally, I will talk about masculine and feminine energy dynamics when it comes to who pays for the first date. So if I'm asked out on a first date and I want to feel into my masculine energy, I'll still pay because I want to take the lead in a relationship. I also want to not withhold my resources whatsoever. Like, I'm not going to be stingy. I'm not going to be frugal. I'm going to be like, hey, what kind of coffee can I get you? I went out on a recent first date and it was set up by a matchmaker. So I had very little control about where it was going to be set. And he set it at a very nice restaurant. And I got there, I'm like, this is a bit outside of my comfort zone for a first date. So I stopped the date after appetizers, just a drink and an appetizer each. And I was like, hey, really nice to get to know you. I'll talk to you soon. There was not a second date.
Is that like the person or the place?
I think that there were some other factors in there. I can't explain why that person didn't want a second date. I would have loved a second date because the first experience was wonderful. But I do understand that matchmakers have a job and they're going to set them up on multiple first dates with multiple people to have as many options as possible to connect their client with the right fit. Yep. And that's just the experience that we were at.
I also agree. I think coffee, if it's going horribly, you can down it really quick, whereas like an alcoholic drink, then you got to drive home. That's a little bit of an issue. What's your experience like with a matchmaker, and would you recommend that? I've seen, what was the show that was on TV, like Millionaire Matchmaker or something, and then I've seen them in the airplanes where you can find like lunch dates. How did you find your matchmaker? And I'm sorry, this is going from like you giving advice to like what's going on with your dating life.
I'm an open book. Go ahead.
So how did you find the matchmaker, and what made you decide to do that? And how has your experience been with it?
So far, so good when it comes to working with a matchmaker. This particular matchmaker slid up into my DMs on Facebook, and it was the most professional DM slide I've ever seen. So we built a relationship, and he came on my podcast as a guest. So I got to understand a little bit more about how he operated on connecting people together. And I've sent him quite a few referrals so far because I trust his judgment. And so far, he has set me up with 3 different people that were all wonderful first dates. One went to a second date, actually 2 went to a second date, and the third did not. And that's all well and good. What I do understand about matchmaking or online dating or meeting people in real life is that they're all options. And the more options that we have to meet new people in ways that we may not have met, would have met them otherwise, is a good thing. If I have the dating apps and then in real life and a matchmaker all working for me, then I have this mindset of abundance that I can bring to my romantic life. On the other end of that, I have more options to choose from, which so far matchmaking has been a positive experience for me, albeit one. But I can talk about that later because it wasn't my matchmaker that set us up.
So Brian said they'd feel awkward if a woman paid. And I think the question is feeling awkward weird, or is that any type of red flag? What exactly does it mean? Does it mean that you can't submit and let somebody else take care of you? Or what's wrong with us if we can't let the other person pay?
That's a really good question. And early on in a relationship, what I want to remind people of is do not compete. Don't compete for the bill. Don't compete for gamesmanship. Like if you want to go to Punch Bowl Social here in Denver and throw darts or do mini bowling, just don't compete with the other person. There's a certain number of times when you can offer to pay and then eventually you're just like, okay, I'm going to surrender to this, not make it a big deal. Ultimately, just learn how to pick your battles. I will grab the bill, pull it to my side of the table, let the other person offer and say, no, I got you. And if it becomes a fight after that, then maybe we're looking into red flags.
I think this is going back to when we were talking about finances. But Janine asked, how exactly would you bring up somebody's debt? So you can kind of see what they're making, how they're living, but that doesn't mean, and this happens pretty often in regards to divorce even, where we'll start working on a case and all of a sudden the one person we're representing has no idea what the other person's finances are. And then we get the credit card statements and we find out that there's hundreds and thousands of dollars worth debt out there that this person didn't even know they had. How do you bring that up within the dating part of a relationship where sometimes they don't even know when they're married?
Sure. This is a really good question, and it's hard to answer because it might not be the right fit for everybody. But I do understand that everybody has a past when it comes to entering into a new relationship in the first few dates. So if you want to be indirect about it, you could ask about their past relationships of like, what caused that relationship to end? Did you guys happen to live together? You could dig deeper and get curious about this person's experience as a whole. You can be indirect about asking about debt and still find out the answer. If somebody's recently divorced within the last year, I'm sure that you're going to get honest answers because that pain, that wound is still pretty fresh and they might actually appreciate a listening ear. Another red flag we can talk about, right? The overshare, the too transparent answer. But if you're really concerned about somebody bringing in debt into your relationship, I feel as if the best way to ask is to be direct. Hey, I really value financial stability and security in my relationship. Here's how I approach that in my own life. I would like to hear a little bit more about how you approach it in your life too. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Is it appropriate to ask for somebody's credit score? No.
I don't think numbers matter. What I want to understand about the person that I'm seeing is, can they support themselves and their family? Do they have a plan for the future? And are they working on it? Are they intentionally focusing on their financial health?
Mm-hmm. Okay, all good. And so you said it's another red flag, and we'll get back to that. We're talking about the oversharer. Again, there's a lot of things, especially in the beginning of a relationship, where things look like they could be really good. Like, oh, I found somebody who can open up, who can talk to me. I found somebody that makes me feel really good about myself. I found somebody that gives me all the attention and they make me number one. How do you start to decipher when it is a healthy thing versus that type of red flag that puts you in a relationship that's either controlling or, narcissistic or things like that?
Such a good question. And I think that that's a very common fear out there in modern dating of like, are they who they truly say that they are? And the true test of that is time. It's going to take time to truly get to know somebody. It's going to take a lot of effort to understand who they are as a person. And the more curious you get with kind and compassionate questions about their past and about their present and about where they're going in the future, the more you're going to understand who this person is. My last relationship ended at around a year, and there were some things that showed up at that time that I never would have expected. And you truly cannot get to know somebody for who they fully are until about that year or 18-month mark. So as far as approaching a relationship with like, I'm afraid that this person isn't going to be who they are. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. When is this person going to reveal who they actually are? Well, that is dating in a nutshell. It's the sorting process of like, are they the right fit for me and what I'm looking for in my life?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting. I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about figuring out who you are and what's important to you. But how do you work with somebody who maybe is coming out of a traumatic relationship? Say they had a narcissistic person in their past or, an abusive relationship and they're moving forward. And maybe this isn't you and you refer them to a therapist, but to understand whether somebody is overreacting because of their traumatic past versus seeing red flags that are actually there. So kind of putting in the red flags because that's what they're used to versus knowing what's healthy.
Such a good question. And this one comes up a lot in my community because oftentimes the community that grew around me here on TikTok, they do have some little T trauma. They have some big T trauma in their past, and they're working on healing to get over that. Now, the difference between what I think you're asking about is how do I recognize their red flags because of their trauma, or are they actually on a healing journey and this dating experience is the right fit for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the major difference that I've noticed between somebody who's ready to be dating and somebody who's still working through that big T or little T trauma is how they're approaching that work. Are they seeing a counselor? And yes, I do find the value of seeing a counselor and therapist plus working with me. I'm a part of the puzzle. I'm not the whole solution, right? Because I get to see my clients 1 hour a week, and the work that they do in between our sessions is where the growth happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I've definitely been on dates with people who cannot let go of their past. And I've been on dates who are like, this is my past and here's what I've done to work through it. And this is how it shows up in my relationships still today. I'm that person. And the way that I show up on when dating is that I'll drip some information about my past. And what I want to illustrate is that this is the person I've become along that journey. As a result of the experiences in my life, this is the person who I am now. And this is the direction that I'm headed in my life.
Okay. And then for boy mom, one girl mom, she said something which was, shoot, I was married to a man for 13 years and didn't find out who he was until after we separated. And I often say, I felt it. I went through my divorce almost 20 years ago at this point, but I said it, and I've heard people say it time and time again through my line of work. You don't really know somebody until you break up with them, and everything's kind of laid out on the table. And now, whether it's the anger, the jealousy, the revenge, whatever the emotions are behind it, all of a sudden you're facing someone and you're like, who the hell are you? So at what point do you feel that you really do know somebody, or do you just never know? And is a relationship all about trust?
Yes and yes. Esther Perel is an amazing therapist, counselor, author, speaker, and she's come up with this idea that if you plan to marry somebody, plan to marry 7 different versions of themselves. Because about every 7 to 10 years, somebody is going to change completely as a person. Not their core values necessarily. They can learn and they can grow over that time, but if you want to be with somebody that long, you're going to have to learn 7 different versions of themselves. And if you're open to that, great, awesome. If you want this person to stay exactly the same as they are the day that you guys met, well, then I think you're setting yourself up for disaster there, because I know I'm going to change over the next 50 years, and I would love to watch my partner change and grow over that time too.
Okay. And where you're a dating coach, Do you think, and one of the things I often hear and I think it's kind of a thing out there, is that once you get married, the sex goes away, the dating goes away, everything kind of falls down, and it even amplifies once you have children, because your children become your priority and everything else falls apart. So do you still continue to work with people even though you're a dating coach? Do you still help them keep that feeling of dating, and so that their relationship can continue to work and to flourish and doesn't just get lost in life?
A great question. The answer is going to piss some people off. It's not easy to keep that spark and that fire going. It takes effort, and it takes intentionality, and it takes awareness too. Labeling the fact that, hey, I know we've been busy with the kids. We haven't been intimate in 7 to 10 days. What's really important to me is fill in the blank, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that little effort goes a long way to kind of fuel the fire of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual intimacy in a relationship, so that we can reconnect when we are distracted by life. And yes, I work with people throughout all stages of their relationship, whether it's a breakup, brand new, we're coming up on a conflict. I just spoke to somebody yesterday who's 18 months into a relationship, and they have this challenge that shows up. I'm happy to help somebody reconnect and decipher and understand what's coming up for them in their relationship, so that they can get back to that ravenous sex life that they started with.
So Janine had said that they're transparent, but find potential partners often hide the truth. If you feel like somebody is not being open with you, is that something that maybe you should decide to move on and go somewhere else? Or is that an overcoming theme, or maybe you expect too much? How do you work that in with your work with people?
The main question that I would ask that person, I hope I get pushback on this, is what is attractive to you about that emotional unavailability? Because the only thing that we can control is our response and our emotions and our own actions. What is it about that person that you're on a date with them? And if they are not transparent, if they're not open with you and they're not available, then what is it about you that is attracted to them that makes you want to go out with them again, or spend mental energy on trying to understand this? To get scientific, it's called cognitive dissonance. And when we overly focus on that key point on a first date, then we're spending mental energy on something that doesn't align with our core values. And that's the red flag. That's the window or the mirror at which we need to look through.
Yeah, because my initial thought there is, there are people who want to help other people. So they want to figure them out. They want to break them open because they feel that that's what they need. But then you end up in a relationship where that person doesn't honor that quality in you, and it ends up being a bad relationship. So I do think, if it's a pattern that you're seeing over and over and over again, it probably does say something more about the person who finds himself in that pattern. And I think that's probably true with everything. Although I'm only the worst person.
But you're not far off. I don't disagree with you there.
And then Brian said that him and his ex actually became better friends after our divorce. And I recall I had a divorce where in my firm, we do a lot of very high conflict. So when they come in, it's often, you see the daggers. There's hate. Yeah. They don't care if that other person is dead. So we had this divorce come in where they came in holding hands. They were very agreeable to making sure that the other person was being taken care of. They showed up at the courthouse holding hands. They didn't want to even separate to stand in at the opposite ends of the table when the judge was agreeing everything. They did the divorce selfie in the courthouse, and then they went out to lunch. And I was like, are you sure that you don't want to stay together? Because I don't know if you're going to find this again. But that brings me to the friendship versus the relationship. You can be the best of friends, but that doesn't make a marriage work. So what is it? This is probably the question you can't answer. What is it that makes a relationship great?
Sounds to me that experience was very amicable for both of them, and that divorce was the best choice for them. It also sounds as if the divorce took a lot of pressure off of their relationship, and they felt a lot of relief in the relationship ending, at least the construct of the relationship. It also sounds like they were still going to maintain a relationship after that divorce, whether it be for co-parenting or for the friendship, whatever the reason being. For me, what I'm looking for in a relationship is a best friend that I can't keep my my hands off of. That power, that strength of connection is what keeps my relationships going. A best friend is somebody that I'm going to support as they grow, cheer them on as they go after the life that they desire, and we get to co-create what that looks like for the two of us together. But we also have that ravenous sex life that I was talking about earlier.
Which is important. And I think sometimes at the beginning, people are like rabbits and they can't keep their stuff together and going. How do you know, there's usually some sort of decline as you settle into the normal life. At what point is that a healthy decline versus too much of a decline? And does it really come down to communication?
Yeah, absolutely. 100% communication about what each person needs in the relationship to feel loved and to feel connected and to feel taken care of, or cared for, is probably the better way to say that. Early on in the relationship, it's great to talk about what physical intimacy needs are. Do I want to sleep with you every single time that I see you? That might be 1 or 2 days a week in the very beginning of a relationship. And then you start cohabitating and now it's like 5 or 6 days a week. And you're like, okay, this is a new standard. Well, what we've seen the relationship evolve from just dating 1 to 2 days a week to cohabitating 5 to 6 days a week, which gives us more access to our partner, more time spent together, more opportunity for us to be physically intimate. And then we bring this life that we've co-created together into the picture, and we've started to add more things like another income property, or more children, or more travel, more family time. All of those things come in between that physical intimacy that we established in the beginning. And it's labeling it, it's naming it, that's going to help us understand it and communicate about it as we navigate the long-term relationship. I've noticed it's been 2 weeks since we've been physically intimate. What I need right now is closeness. I would like to spend an evening, just the two of us, so that we can jump each other's bones.
And I want candles.
Or a bath, or a shower, or a massage. All of these things that are, we could dig into the love languages. Is it physical touch that you need? Is it quality time? Is it gifts? Is it acts of service? Do you need me to cook you dinner first? Do you need me to spend quality time with you over a candlelit dinner? Everybody's needs are going to be different in order to fuel that fire and that spark long term.
And I think something, again, because I see everything that goes wrong in a relationship, which I think puts me in a position to be able to say, hey, don't do that. But I think, and you talked earlier about the core values that somebody has and what's important to them, and talking about, the communication and the love languages. I think it's very important to make sure that you are finding somebody that matches with that, because if all those things are important for you, but you then get with somebody who has no idea what you're talking about and doesn't care what you're talking about, so they don't care to learn what your love language is. Well, you sit there and read, was it Gary that wrote that book?
Chapman,
yeah. So you sit and you read all of it. How can I show this person I love them? You're putting all the work into somebody who's not going to give that back to you. And I think that's where a lot of people, at least how I see it, go wrong, is they start to kind of step away from what's important from them. Or they think that, hey, if I put all this work into it, then the other person's going to eventually reciprocate. And it doesn't happen.
Yeah, right.
So I have another question here that's, how long after a marriage do you start dating? Their ex only took 2 months. However, they've been single for a year and a half at this point. So do you have the right answer? I know my own opinion, but
yeah, sure. The timeline is going to be different for everybody. The one thing that I hear as a common thread amongst my female clients is that they knew that the relationship was over long before it was actually over. So they start the healing process 6 months before it ends, a year before it ends, and they might be a little bit more ready to date when they come out of it. Maybe they are that person who spent time researching what was going wrong in their relationship, and they grew personally and they developed a great, strong connection to their core values while they were still in that relationship. It ends, and then they're like, okay, I'm actually really available right now emotionally. Typically, when it shows up in my dating life, I'm not going to date anybody until a year after their divorce. That information is really hard for me to kind of sift out and draw out of a date, because I'm not necessarily going to disqualify them before we're on a date of like, hey, when was your divorce finalized? But I do find that there is certain length of time that healing takes.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they started doing work before the end of the relationship, they still have to grieve the actual end date. And you must go through those 5 stages of grief, from denial to anger to bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. If I'm on a date with somebody who's less than a year out of a marriage, I'm going to be looking for that acceptance of that marriage ending.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the key things that I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I think not only that, but I think a lot of people, especially if it was a relationship that ended suddenly and you didn't expect it, there's a hole there. There's a gap in your life where, maybe you knew you guys didn't get along, but you knew that they were always going to be there for dinner, or you knew on Saturday morning they were going to be able to mow the grass or clean the house or whatever. What I see sometimes is people just jumping in to fill that hole. And I think that's not fair to them, because instead of really doing what's best for them overall, they're doing what's best just to make themselves feel a little better in the moment. And it's not fair to the other person either, because they're not really available. So I don't think there's a right answer. My response would be, if you're in the midst of a divorce, try not to do anything, because it can make it more complicated, more costly, and then I end up making more money. So keep your money and don't make it complicated.
I hear you there.
So then I have another question. I think there's been a couple on your side as well. This is more of a comment, but I want to bring it up because I think it is actually really, really important. And it's something that my husband and I, talked about when we first decided to enter into a serious relationship. This is Rin, how can we fix this? Every relationship needs 60 minutes a week to communicate the contractual agreements in the relationship. Now that sounds so unsexy. That's even worse than a prenup. Like that just sounds horrible, because it's not a relationship. We're not talking about love. But for a marriage to work, it's almost like a business partnership. And that's really how I compare it sometimes. And I've heard people say, well, that's not cool. Like, our relationship isn't a business contract, but it is, because it's always making sure people are on the right page, and making sure that, just as if you're a shareholder in a company, that you're doing things that are putting your company first, not so much just yourself. And so I think that is such a great comment, because it's that communication and sometimes the perception, that if you don't have that conversation, that one person might think you're on the same page and the other person thinks, hey, we're on this page over here. You think you guys are lined up, but you're going this way. I just wanted to point that out, because I did really think that was important. And my husband, I always say, every morning we wake up, it's almost like you have to take your vows over again. You have to say, I'm going to commit to this relationship. I'm going to commit to you. I'm going to make us a priority, and not let all the crap in life, pull you down.
Right. Yeah, I'm all about having a relationship agreement and doing regular check-ins in order to address the question of, how are we putting our relationship first? I completely value that intention and that dedication to the agreement that we make in the beginning. Do I think that it takes a specific number of time each week? No. But do I want that structure in a relationship to be a part of it? Absolutely, 100%. What I like to bring into my own relationship is an emotional check-in every week. Not a contractual, not a business check-in each week, but an emotional check-in. And I actually have 5 areas that I check in with my partner when I'm in a partnership. How are we feeling appreciated? How connected are we feeling? How's the chemistry in our relationship? How's our communication? And then finally, how respected do we feel? And
sorry, I'm going to interrupt one real quick, because when you're going through that and the other person goes, oh, it's good, it's fine, we're good. Does that mean it's good, or do you start digging in more? Or what is your expectations in how you communicate even about those things? Is it just a check the box, or do you expect a little bit more?
I feel as if this can be part of the initial relationship agreement conversation of, like, the relationship that I'm looking for is founded on communication. And what communication looks like when we do regular check-ins is a dedicated moment each week. I'd like it to be the same. My last partner and I, we used to do this after church every single week. We would check in with each other, no length of time determined, just however long it took us to each get through these 5 shares. What that did is it helped us kind of compound the emotional connection between the two of us. And over time, our shares got deeper, our shares got more lengthy, and our shares got more intimate, which helped us develop a deeper connection with each other. And I want to go back to what you were sharing earlier is like when one person is doing all the effort, all the work, and the other person isn't growing or reciprocating that effort, I think it comes down to this conversation as well. Like, how are our check-ins about our relationship going? And I like to put the relationship first in every step of the way. And I view the relationship as a round hole. And if I keep trying to shove a square peg of a person into that round hole, it's not going to work for me. And what I hear you describing is like somebody who is chasing after or is attracted to that square peg and they keep trying to fit it into the round hole and it's just not working for them. There's a self-awareness that needs to come to the front and say, why am I accepting this? What is it about this person that I keep trying and not getting the same in return? And is that the life that I want to design? Is that the life I want to co-create with somebody else? And is this actually this relationship giving me satisfaction? And is it contributing to my happiness?
I think that's going to be my new tagline. Are you a round hole and you need to get rid of your square?
Your square peg, yeah.
You have some really good comments going on over there. So I've got a question here of thoughts on bringing kids into a relationship. I think this was in response to you talking about, taking a year off after the divorce to kind of find yourself and make sure that that's where you are. And they're saying, they personally feel a year is too early. Again, I have my own opinions, but let's hear yours.
Sure. I think that there's no one timeline for introducing a partner to our kids, or the kids topic is very wide. It's a lot to handle. So I feel as if you want more kids in your life, the earlier you bring that conversation up in the relationship, the better, because compatibility is a key component in my core values to bring to a relationship. And the kids topic, the kids conversation, introducing each other to their kids can show us how compatible our relationship really truly is. I had this conversation the other night. The person I'm seeing has 3 children. I have one 20-year-old. So the conversation needs to be had of like, what does that look like for us in our relationship if there's a potential relationship here? It's still early, so we're kind of navigating those conversations respectfully, right? And for me, I'm not looking to rush into meeting anyone's kids. I feel as if there needs to be a foundation of trust, respect, appreciation, and chemistry and intimacy between the 2 parents long before the kids become involved. There's no exact timeline, but no less than 3 months, no longer than a year though. Like if somebody's not met my child within the first year of dating, then there's probably something that we need to talk about there. How deep is this level of commitment that we have for each other when you haven't met my friends, family, or children?
Mm-hmm. And do you think that ranges where you said you have a 20-year-old, if we're talking about a 20-year-old versus a 5-year-old, who your 20-year-old, has developed themselves, they've known you for this long period of time. If you're talking about a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old or somebody who is going to be modeling after your relationships, does that change anything that you have to say?
I feel as if it comes back to the 2 adults making the best decision for themselves first, and then they get to make the best decision for their children as well. Like when a partnership is formed and the connection is there and the trust is there, then the timeline can be a little bit more fluid. Yes, the 5-year-old, the 8-year-old is in their more formative years. And what the parent of those children gets to decide is, has my partner modeled the behavior that I'm looking to bring into my family unit? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is yes, then I say go for it slowly. Spend a little bit of time, maybe 15 to 30 minutes the first time, maybe an hour the second time, and then a little bit longer, increasing in time over time, not rushing into it like sleepovers the first week. That's just not going to make a lot of sense to children, and they're going to bring a lot of chaos into their lives.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Now I have another question. This happened with my husband, even as a divorce attorney. I tell people this is what I do. So I saw this while I was dating, and I saw it with my husband, and I've continued, now he's seen it play out time and time again. That as soon as I say I'm a divorce attorney, I start hearing about all the problems, that they have with their relationship. And for me, I'm always kind of looking, hey, could this be a potential client? Where are we going? And I remember sitting there with my husband, and he started telling me about, his divorce, and there were certain things he didn't like still. And I go, are we going like the attorney client route, or are we going somewhere different? And he was like, different. So we were able to move forward there. Do you get that? When you're dating and they bring up the question of what do you do? And you say, well, I'm a dating coach, does that make them feel like, oh crap, like he's a professional? like how does that work in your daily life?
That's a very good question. I generally don't lead with what I do for a living. I talk and what I'm so passionate about. I do have a day job, so I'm a restaurant general manager by trade. And then that gives me my daytime, because I work evenings, to pursue this personal growth and development through relationships that I'm passionate about for my life. I think the person that I'm seeing now, she understood that my personal training business developed into more of a personal coaching business. Mm-hmm. And we get the opportunity to connect deeply over how modern dating can be very savage. What I want to encourage people to do on the first few dates is to be playful about how modern dating is rough. It is so rough out there with text messages, social media, and dating apps. And it seems as if everybody has so many options at their fingertips that I want to bring the playfulness and the candor to the first few dates about that topic. I like to ask questions like, hey, what does dating look like for you right now? What has been your worst experience on Hinge if we met on Hinge? Or what is your experience with the matchmaker that set us up so far? I get all different types of answers. The question that I get most frequently is like, Dave, do you think you know too much about relationships? And does that hold you back because you're looking for like this upper echelon relationship? And I think that the answer is yes and. Sure, absolutely. I know a lot about relationships and I know that my standards are really high. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be flexible in meeting my potential partner where they're at and modeling the behavior that I'm going to expect as a standard in my relationship.
2 questions off that. I'll try to ask one at a time and remember what they both were. With modern day, and I see this even within my business, text messages. Everybody knows, everybody carries their phone around 24/7. It's either in their hand, in their back pocket, in their coat pocket. It is always close by. And we have really become a society of instant gratification. You send a text message, you expect a response. A lot of times you can see the read receipts. And I remember back when I was younger, we still had telephones attached to the wall and you had to do a whole circle. And then you just had to sit there and wait and be like, I think they're going to call tonight, so I don't want to go out. What does that do for relationships with that instant gratification versus the commitment necessary in order to make a healthy relationship work? And 2, I remember when I was younger, the big question was, how long do you wait to call? I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. Is it? And
yeah.
How long do you wait to call?
Sure. I'll answer that second question first because it's the simpler of the questions to answer. A day and a half is generally a window of opportunity that's going to encourage one person to begin to think about that. Oh, are they actually gonna call? And then a day and a half later, they are a little surprised that you did call. I'm not the 3-day rule guy. I'm not the 6-day rule guy. I'm the day and a half. We all have busy lives and we all have things that show up. We certainly want to demonstrate interest and pursuit of a partner. We don't want to, of course, become needy or clingy. The first question that you asked is a little bit more complicated because it comes down to boundaries. When I have certain boundaries that are touched up against in a relationship, my body's going to alert me. Okay, well, I texted this person an invitation to dinner and I heard back 4 days later. My body's going to give me a response that says, oh, that's a boundary that's being pushed up against. And I have 2 choices. I can let it go and let it build resentment, or I can address it early on in the relationship and say, hey, what I'm looking for from a relationship is founded on communication. What I need is maybe a text back within 24 hours, 36 hours. Is that something you're willing to work on with me as we get to know each other better? That's how I respond on that side of the boundary. When it comes to the other side of the boundary of the person who's not responding right away, I understand everybody has a busy life. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the holistic psychologist, Dr. Nicole LaPera. She's phenomenal at kind of narrowing it down to this topic. She just posted about this the other day of what is our expectation about how people respond? And if people have things showing up in their lives like work is consuming me, my family is consuming me, my kids are consuming me, there's 2 questions that I want that person to ask. Is dating the right fit for you right now? And what space do you have in your life for another person? And if you're not responding within 24 to 48 hours to an invitation for dinner, I need you to take a look at what boundary is there for you. Do you need to set certain boundaries in your own life about saying no to dating for a little while because you're not doing that person the other person any favors? You're not doing yourself any favors by becoming consumed by another thing in your life.
That's such a great way to put that. And I think, talking about the boundaries, obviously you want to establish healthy boundaries for yourself. And that's something you should know going into a relationship. How do you figure out whether it's a healthy relationship or a game? Because you've heard about the dating games and, like you referred to the 3-day rule. Do you play by the rules? Do you play the game, or do you go with your heart? Which one's right? Which has more success? And then how do you know if you're the one playing a game, rather than yourself?
I love this question. I appreciate you asking it. I am an authentic dating coach. So what my goal is to share how to show up authentically in the modern era of text messaging, social media, and dating apps when it feels as if everybody else is sending mixed signals and playing games. What I like to understand and work with my clients on is getting in touch with their body and what signals their body is sending them to recognize a game player. What I don't do in my coaching business is I don't teach the attraction method. What I do, the attraction method is basically the game. Like, I'm going to wait 3 days so that they are thinking about me all the time and that I'm taking up more of their mental space. That's not what I'm teaching. But I am coaching clients to recognize it when other people are doing it to them by tuning into what their body response is telling them in the moment. I also give them skills on how to understand and decipher and interpret what their body is trying to tell them. Are these just emotions coming up? Is this attachment as opposed to a connection? And that's what I work with my clients on. When it comes down to playing the game, your body is going to tell you what's authentic for you and what's not. And when I feel, let's just take TikTok, for example. When I post a video that's not authentic to my message, TikTok, it just falls flat. 100 views, 200 views. Not the 2.1 million views when a video I post is authentic or anything like that. And people are the same reflection for us. When I don't show up authentically in a relationship, when I am playing the game, when it's not just natural distractions of work and kids and life getting in the way of me communicating with a partner or a potential partner, the world and the universe is going to reflect that back to me. Dave, you're not showing up authentically. The person you wanted or thought you wanted to be with, it's not the right time. It's not the right person. It's going to pass you by, basically. And when I show up authentically, when I coach my clients to show up authentically, what is meant for them is drawn to them.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And that, I wanted to bring that up because I think too many people feel as though they don't know the rules. And I see this a lot where people are coming out of divorce or, they're older and they're getting back into, the dating game. I think it's a matter of really knowing who you are, what's important, and not letting, the rules kind of persuade you or as somebody is telling you what is right. The difference between red flags and unhealthy. I do really believe that's super important. If somebody wants to work with you, how would they go about connecting with you? How do they reach out to you and get started?
Sure. TikTok Messenger is a great way for them to do that. They can reach out with a question and we'll set up a 30-minute free consultation with that person to see if one-on-one or group coaching is the better fit for them. And then we'll go from there.
Oh, group coaching. Have you ever had people connect during group coaching? That's interesting.
Well, the one thing I do with group coaching is I do put it in a women's group and a men's group, and I don't commingle those two groups.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess that works.
However, if you're familiar with StrengthsFinder, being a connector is my top strength when you do that assessment. I naturally connect people who are meant to be together, whether that be for friendship or for business reasons or for romantic relationships. One of the greatest honors I've ever had is a former roommate of mine. I introduced him to his now wife. They have a son, and I got the chance to go to Michigan to be at their wedding.
That's awesome.
So it does happen.
I was going to ask, do you get invited to weddings?
As a personal trainer, I was a big part of my clients' lives and their personal growth and development, which helped me kind of understand how to embody that intuition and that authenticity as a personal trainer. But I've been invited to about 4 or 5 client weddings over the course of my 12-year career.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't usually get that. They don't want me there.
It's a sign. It might be bad luck to have your divorce attorney at your wedding.
And then my other question is, where you said you're in the restaurant business and people go on dates in the restaurant business. Do you ever hand your card out and be like, you guys could do this better? No, just me.
Nope. I don't spend time where I'm not invited to spend it.
All
But
right.
I do kind of, there was an instance about a month ago where it's a busy bar that I work at temporarily while I wait for my restaurant to open in mid-April. And this guy comes in and he got there first and he's like asking the server, he's like, what should I order my date? I mean, I think it'd be really cool to order my date a drink before she gets here. And we're thinking like an espresso martini. And I was emphatically, no, do not order the drink for the date before they show up.
Yeah, especially like I'm one that's I never drink the same thing twice, and I never even know until I'm there. I'm like, do you have a drink menu? Like every time. So I have friends that bartend, and I walk in their bar, they're like, oh no, she's here. We don't know what we're gonna get. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think not assuming, is a good thing.
sure.
Well, again, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I hope everybody who's watching, got something out of it that you can take some sort of thought that you had or a comment that was made and implement that into your own life to create a healthier relationship, whether you're looking for it or whether you're in one. If you don't already follow both of us, we're both really cool people. He's way more popular than me, but I'm getting there. And I appreciate every single person, who has liked this live because, that's real. We get it like a thing at the end that tells us how good we did. So, this will be nice. So
Yeah, thank you very
again,
much, Heather. I
thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully we can do it again at some point. All right.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody.